You think you're ready. You've watched the videos. You've bought the gear. Maybe you've even gone on a few weekend trips, tested out your fire starter, pitched a tarp in the backyard. But deep down, there's a question clawing at your chest. What happens when the plan doesn't work? What if the night's colder than expected? What if your shelter collapses at 2 a.m.? What if your knife slips and there's no one around to stop the bleeding? You see, survival isn't just about gear and skills. It's about consequences. And out there in the real world, consequences don't give warnings. They just happen. Fast, silent, final. Every year, someone walks into the woods thinking they're ready because they saw some viral survival hack online, and they never walked back out. They trusted a knot they barely practiced. They relied on a fire trick that worked once in a YouTube short. They built a shelter that looked sturdy, but had no understanding of load distribution or wind direction. And when the storm hit, or the temperature dropped, or the ground gave way, that's when the truth came out. Not in a dramatic, movie-style collapse, but in a slow, creeping realization that they made one mistake too many. By the time they knew, it was too late. Because here's what nobody tells you. Survival doesn't forgive overconfidence. It doesn't care how many likes your camp setup got on Instagram. It doesn't care if your knife is custom steel or $20 from a gas station. It cares if you know how to use it, really no. It cares if you can adapt when your plan falls apart. If you can stay calm when your fire won't light, when your paracord frays, when the silence gets too loud. That's the real test. Not looking good, not being cool, just staying alive when the margin for error is zero. Let's be honest, some of the survival tips you see online, they're suicide wrapped in style. I've seen people suggest melting plastic bottles for cordage, building shelters under dead trees, or storing fire tinder in glass jars that turn into magnifying glasses under sunlight. Sounds clever, until it isn't. Until your shelter starts leaking, or your DIY hack becomes the very thing that starts a fire you can't control. People love shortcuts, but shortcuts in the wild are just ways to get lost, or worse, not come back at all. And the worst part? Most people don't even know they're making a fatal mistake until it's made. You need to understand this now. Nature doesn't play fair. You could do everything right and still get blindsided. But if you're doing things wrong from the start, if you're relying on tricks instead of principles, you're not just increasing risk, you're begging to fail. The real survivors, the ones who come home every time, they don't chase gimmicks. They master the boring stuff. How to tie a knot that never slips. How to find dry tinder after 3 days of rain. How to sleep without freezing even when the thermometer lies. It's not sexy, but it's what works. Now let me ask you, when was the last time you tested your shelter in wind? Not calm conditions, not Instagram breeze. I'm talking 50 miles per hour gusts at 3 a.m. with rain in your face. Do you know if your stakes will hold? Do you know if that cordage you trust won't snap under load? Or are you just assuming, because you saw a guy do it once online? That's the gap between thinking you're ready and being ready. One holds up in theory, the other in reality. And only one of them keeps you alive when the night gets ugly. And here's the kicker. When you fail in the wild, there's no reset button. You don't learn from your mistakes. You pay for them. In blood, in broken bones, in rescue helicopters that don't always get there in time. Or sometimes, you don't get rescued at all. You just vanish. Another name on a missing persons list. Another story people tell with a shake of the head. He was experienced. He knew what he was doing. But experience doesn't save you when it's built on shaky ground. Only truth does. So I'm going to tell you something that could make all the difference. Test everything before you rely on it. Before you bet your life on it. Test that shelter in bad weather. Test that fire starter after soaking it in water. Test your boots by walking 10 miles, not one. Because the moment you need your gear to work, that's not the time to be wondering if it might. That's the time it has to. Now, before I take you further into this, pause for a second. There's a link pinned in the comments. It leads to a resource that has saved lives, literally. It's not a product pitch, it's not fluff. It's one of those things you'll wish you had before things went wrong. Trust me, you're going to want to check that out before your next trip. It might just be the difference between coming back or becoming a statistic. All right, now let's dig deeper. You think you know how to build a fire? I mean, really know? Can you do it blindfolded? In wind? With damp fuel? Can you keep it lit without babysitting it every 10 minutes? Because that's the standard. Not just starting a fire, but making it last. Same with knots. Anyone can tie a fancy knot. But can you do it one-handed, in the dark, with cold fingers, under stress? That's where theory fails and practice begins. Most people's skills are built in comfort, but survival happens in chaos. And the more chaos you can simulate now, the more control you'll have when it really counts. Let me paint a picture for you. You're 5 miles into the backcountry. Rain starts. Not a drizzle, a downpour. You rush to set up your shelter, but your tarp's too small. The angle's wrong. Wind shifts. Water pools. Now everything's wet. Your sleeping bag? Damp. Your clothes? Soaked. Your fire? Won't start. You've got 4 hours till sunset, and the temp's dropping fast. That's not a scenario. That's reality. For someone who overestimated their setup and underestimated the wild. You still think you're ready? Because here's the truth. You're only as strong as your weakest assumption, and most people have no idea which of their assumptions is about to break. Is it your shelter? Your cordage? Your fire skills? Your route planning? Your nutrition? Your morale? Because when one breaks, it triggers another. It's a chain, and the chain doesn't snap all at once. It unravels, quietly, until suddenly you're out of time, and you're alone. You're still here, which means you're either terrified right now or you're finally starting to realize something. Survival isn't about how many tricks you know, it's about how many mistakes you can avoid. Because in the wild, you don't get do-overs. You get one chance, one night, one storm, one wrong knot, and the consequences are permanent. I know people who went into the woods with confidence and came out in body bags. Smart people, careful people, but nature doesn't care how smart you think you are. It only cares about physics, weather, and time. Those are the only rules that matter out there. You either respect them, or you become another cautionary tale someone else tells to warn beginners. And trust me, you don't want your story being told that way. So ask yourself, are you preparing to survive, or are you just rehearsing for disaster? Because a lot of folks out here are doing the latter without even realizing it. They build shelters that look great for Instagram, but collapse when it rains. They tie knots they learned in 5-second clips, but never test under pressure. They rely on hacks for fire, ignoring the basics of fuel, airflow, and moisture. And when things go wrong, there's no cameraman to bail them out. No dramatic music, just silence and consequences. The woods don't discriminate. It will take the overconfident beginner just as quickly as the seasoned pro who cuts a corner. And most of the time, it's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. It's just final. The reality is, survival doesn't care about your pride. It won't reward you for using complicated knots or fancy gear. It rewards those who understand that simple done right will always beat fancy done wrong. Double check your knots. Inspect every tree, every stake, every spark. Back up everything that can fail. Because something will fail, it's just a question of when. And when that moment comes, you'll be glad you took the time to prepare instead of relying on a shortcut. That's not fear-mongering. That's the truth. I've seen too many people get hurt, or worse, because they thought a life-saving trick would protect them. But as you can see, some of those tricks are nothing more than traps wearing a clever disguise. Before we wrap up, I want you to think about the last time you went into the wild. Did you really test your setup? Or did you assume everything would hold because it always had before? What small detail did you overlook that could have turned into a nightmare? Let me know down in the comments. I read every story because those real experiences are what keep us all sharp. And if you haven't already, check that link I pinned. It might just save your life, or at least make you rethink something you've been doing wrong this whole time. Remember, no one ever thinks they're the one who's going to make a fatal mistake. But everyone who did thought exactly the same thing. In the next video, I'm going to show you 3 so-called survival hacks that almost got me killed and how I adapted them into techniques that actually work when your life is on the line. If you want to make sure you never fall for the same mistakes I did, turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Survival isn't about being fearless. It's about being prepared for the things that no one else sees coming. And after today, you've already taken that first step. The question is, are you ready for the next one?